Thursday, and that's when the credit rating agency, reporting agency, revealed a data breach that could potentially impact 143 million Americans. Now, Equifax CEO Richard Smith will testify before the House Energy and Commerce Committee on October 3rd. Joining us first on CNBC is Representative Greg Walden of Oregon. He's the chairman of the committee holding the hearing. Good to have you here, sir.
It's good to be with you, Michelle. Thank you.
What are you going to ask him?
Well, we're going to ask him a series of questions, certainly, about what happened, when did they find out they had a problem, all the things that have been out in the press, frankly. We know now they've admitted that there was a software application called Apache Struts. It seemed to be where the vulnerability was. That had been out there, that there was a vulnerability for some time, publicly known. Did they know? Did they act? Did they not act? What happened? My view at the Energy and Commerce Committee on the Republican side is that we need to get the facts, and that's we need to put consumers first in our policy making. So we're all about trying to get to the bottom of this matter. You know, this will be a different sort of Mr. Smith comes to Washington. It's not about a run on the bank. This Mr. Smith comes to Washington because it's a run on your financial data, and that's really important.
Is this a pretext or a precursor to regulation and more regulation?
You know, it may be. Again, I got a journalism degree, and my job is to get to the facts first, the policy second, but always put the consumer ahead of both. And so, you know, consumers are really troubled by what happened here. They should be. They're concerned about the response. They're concerned about what's their future hold, what kind of protection do they need. Monitoring doesn't solve a ripoff. It just tells you got a problem. How far should that go? Who should pay for that? There are lots of data breach issues here that we will take very seriously and get to the bottom of to the extent they can give us the answers. And of course, there are the answers about the need to get about the executives who sold their stock. Company says they had no knowledge. Boy, the timing sure doesn't look good.
I understand that this is a fact-finding mission, but when you say it may be the prelude to more regulation, I mean, is it feasible that you come out of these hearings, in your view, is it feasible, and status quo prevails, that whatever environment exists right now that has allowed this data breach to happen will continue to exist as is?
You know, I did multiple hearings in the past on cybersecurity and data breach, and in almost every witness at every hearing said, be careful not to over-regulate in this space. You'll tie our hands, misallocate our capital. It's too dynamic of a threat to lock into statute. Now, I understand that on the cybersecurity side. When it comes to consumer notification, consumer information, we have to also think it through, because in some cases they don't want the word out that they've got a problem until they can patch the hole. Otherwise, other hackers will take advantage of it. So it's a balance between protecting other data and worse events.
I hear what you're saying. I get it. Apache, we were talking about the open source database, had some issues. Did you see the BBC report that at least in Equifax's Argentina servers, the login and password were both admin?
See, this is really bad.
Negligence. That's not a computer problem. That's a human being being stupid.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things you got to get to the facts. I was not aware of that BBC report. But if admin's your name and your password, dealing with the incredibly important and very private financial information and personal identification information of consumers, that's just awful. I mean, there's no question.
By the way, Walden Security contacting Krebs Online, which is a secure, as you know, the security blog, in case you want to follow up on this admin password, because
that's outrageous.
That came out yesterday, and that's outrageous.
Well, and see, that you can't stop stupidity. I mean, you can't even legislate against it, but you can sure hold people accountable for it, and that's what we will do. First, we got to get to the facts. We need, you know, again, back to my old journalism days. I want to know all the answers here. I want to ask all the questions. Then we'll get to what the actions are going forward. I don't want to, you know, you can throw a lot of pieces of legislation out there, grab a headline, but I want to do it in a way that's thoughtful, that where we get the answers first, and that we know what we're dealing with.
Another big news event of the day, sir, is Lattice Semiconductor could not be bought by this Chinese-backed private equity firm. Any thoughts on that? That's your home state there of Oregon.
It is. We've had one of these issues before, frankly, on a wind farm that got shut down in my district. And once it goes through that process, as you may or may not know, legally, they can't even tell members of Congress, with one exception, I think the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, what was involved in the decision-making. I haven't had a chance to review that. I read the story this morning. I assume there's some national security concern.
Did the CEO lobby you, try to get that changed? Did they reach out to you?
No, Nope, not to me personally. I don't know if they sent something to the office or not, but I haven't seen anything or heard from anyone on it.
Back to Equifax for a second. Do you know whether your data were breached, number one? And number two, do you operate from the assumption, as one of our prior guests does, that basically everybody's data has probably already been breached one way or another?
It was former intelligence chairman Mike Rogers on, because he used to say when he chaired the Intel Committee, two types of companies in America, those that know they've been breached and those that haven't, that don't know. And so the point here is with something that was sensitive as the amount and specificity of data that Equifax and these other organizations hold, they should be so far in advance that a problem that had been identified for the public in underlying software and a patch that was available, that is
shouldn't the regulation
malpractice
on them be even tighter? I mean, we're talking about breaches like a Target breach or a Yahoo breach, but the sole purpose of Equifax is to gather consumers' most sensitive information and keep that information and then repackage it and sell it to lenders. So shouldn't the rules governing their security be much tighter than other companies with that data?
I believe that they should be. The question is, are they? The question is, are there rules in place and they just didn't follow them? The question is, did stupidity prevail here that allowed for a breach? These are the questions we need to get answers to before we say what we'll do in terms of a policy. But again, if you put the consumer first, that's my goal. When we come out of this fact-finding process, we will move into whatever policy initiatives we need to have at that time.
Sir, you also come from a state that's got a high state income tax. There's talk when tax reform happens that they're not going to allow that anymore when it comes to deductions. If that's one of the provisions within tax reform, you're going to vote for it?
Well, we have to look at the total tax package. I also come from a state that has no sales tax. So many states have both sales tax and income tax. What I want to know is what's the overall tax relief for the middle class? Will this create jobs and jump the GDP up to 3% rather than 2.5% or whatever anemic level it was at before? I want to look at the whole package. Frankly, they've not released the detail, so I can't do the evaluation, but the middle class is coming out ahead, and and I think we need to do tax reform and be competitive internationally. We have companies with stranded
even if you can't deduct
offshore.
Your state income tax.
Let's look at it as a whole. Everybody's for closing loopholes, by the way, until they discover it's theirs, the one they use. So the key here is to look at it overall. We haven't had that chance yet, and I want to see what it looks like overall.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to have you here.